Shane Gisbergen signed a development deal contract with Trackhouse Racing, and Lift Fast Motorsports could potentially sell their charter. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just demonstrate those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start talking about William Swash. As last night, William Swash was the 2023 ARCA East champion. Huge congratulations to William Swash, a 16-year-old up-and-coming talent. There's a really good chance in the next year or two he's going to be in the Xfinity Series. He's obviously going to be running almost full-time at ARCA once again in 2024, and he's going to make select starts in the truck and Xfinity Series in the next couple years as well. William, I think, is a very talented driver. He's earned this championship, in my opinion. Luke Fenhaus had done everything to get up there. Unfortunately, Luke Fenhaus crashed in the ARCA race at Bristol. I think after Jess Liv had spun the tires or something along those lines. But nonetheless, massive and huge congratulations to William Swash on being your 2023 ARCA East champion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Zhou Guanyu. As it was announced yesterday that Zhou Guanyu will be returning to Alfa Romeo in 2024. This confirms that the team will remain the same in 2024 as Valtteri Bottas will also be returning to Alfa Romeo in 2024 as well. Zhou Guanyu's had ups and downs here in 2023, but I also think Alfa Romeo has been struggling points in 2023 as well. And it's really good to keep that stability going into 2024. There are some teams that are rumored to have some big changes when it comes to the Formula 1 paddock for 2024. But nonetheless, I am very happy to see that Zhou Guanyu is going to be returning to the team in the 2024 season. I think this is the right decision, the right call for the team, and nonetheless glad to see that he'll be returning to the Alfa Romeo team in 2024. I'm glad to see he'll be back with Alfa Romeo. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon. As it was announced yesterday or on Wednesday that they have swapped their pit crews starting this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. The tire changers, the carrier, and the jackmen swap. The fuel men are going to stay the same, but everything else swaps. Now, why are they doing this? Well, Austin Dillon's pit crew, I believe, has been better than Kyle Busch this year. And if you watch the last few NASCAR Cup Series races, the pit crew has struggled. Now, some of the mistakes that Kyle Busch has had on pit road this year have been, unfortunately, his fault. But we looked back at the race at Kansas, and he lost a ton of positions throughout the race on pit road at many races this year in 2023. So that is a massive and huge reason why they've gone ahead and swapped the pit crews on pit road. I think this is the right decision and right call for them to go ahead and do this, and I think this overall is going to help Kyle Busch and probably help Austin Dillon as well. But they're doing this kind of similar to what they did with Christopher and Ty Gibbs. But let's be honest, the Ty Gibbs picker that worked really well with Ty Gibbs has struggled with Christopher Bell this year in the few races we've seen. I think nonetheless, so this is a good decision on their part. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about ThorSport Racing. For the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race last night at Bristol, there was a crew chief swap that took place. So Brian Ross, who had been the crew chief for Ben Rhodes, will now be working with Hailie Deegan for the final 3 races of 2023. And Rich Lucius, who had been working with Hailie Deegan all year in 2023, is moving over to reunite with Ben Rhodes, who he won the championship with in 2021. I think this is the right decision. I think Rich Lucius is a really good crew chief. I know that Hailie Deegan has struggled in the truck series this year in the 2023 season, but I do think Brian Ross working with her, having someone younger, I think really is going to help Hailie Deegan out. And we saw her have a pretty solid run in the first race that she had worked with Brian Ross, where she did finish in the top 20, ran top 15 and top 20 all night long. And Ben Rhodes got a top 10 last night in the truck race too, so it's not like it didn't benefit both of them. I think both of the drivers had solid runs, and I think in this crew chief swap, I think is going to benefit both of them long term. But this is the third crew chief swap that we've seen for Ben Rhodes this year. I know Ben Rhodes is basically the biggest priority at that team currently at the moment, unless you're Matt Crafton. But still, I think this is overall a good move from the team, and I'm glad to see they've gone ahead and swapped the crew chiefs. I think this was the best and good decision that they could have made. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Michael McDowell. Now, I kind of talked about this on the channel a couple days ago, but they basically are adding stage breaks back at the Charlotte Roval, and Joey Logano was also in favor of bringing them back. And Joey Logano, I think, is saying, why are a lot of people upset? Well, Michael McDowell actually called out Joey Logano and kind of called him out for sending a 5 wide into a corner and bumper cars, and he said indoor karting is better. Do all the fans really want this? I 1000% agree with Michael McDowell. I think a lot of NASCAR fans do not want the stage breaks. Look, if you were to ask me what I want, I personally am not against stages in general. I think awarding drivers throughout the race and giving them points for them being up front, I think is absolutely a really, really great decision. But the main reason we had gotten rid of stage cautions in the first place was to prevent stuff like this where you had drivers getting really crazy restarts, getting their days ruined, having to choose if they were going to win the race or if they were going to collect stage points. But those guys that were going to collect stage points were going to get stuck in traffic. And it was very, very difficult to pass, and it's very difficult to pass with the next-gen car currently at the moment. So I think that's why a lot of fans are really frustrated with the decision, and that's why a lot of fans also don't agree with Joey Logano, is because Joey Logano also kind of sometimes can be a kiss-ass in NASCAR. We also know that Joey Logano wants to dive bomb it 5 wide into a corner, which is exactly the truth. But I really appreciate Michael McDowell not holding back there, giving a really strong opinion. I think a majority of the fan base and a lot of drivers really agree. It's funny that the people that are for these stage races are the ones that either will end up getting lapped at these road courses or struggle at these road courses. I mean, Joey Logano, it's no secret, has not been a good road course racer for the last couple of years, albeit Team Penske struggled on the road course this year. Even Austin Cindric at times has not looked really great on the road courses this year in 2023. But nonetheless, I think that I agree with Michael McDowell. I don't agree with Joey Logano. I don't agree with Rodney Childers either, who are for stage breaks. I don't want to say I'm not a fan of it, and personally, I don't think it's a good decision overall that they're bringing stage breaks back at the road courses. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Concrete Bristol. Now, over the last few weeks, there's been a little chatter circulating that Bristol could host 2 concrete dates in 2024. And Bob Pockets interviewed Brad Keselowski, and Brad Keselowski is among those who want 2 concrete Bristol dates. Now, obviously, there have been a lot of chatter circulating that Bristol was only going to have 1 date for 2024. The Bristol race is likely not coming back. In fact, many say in the industry Bristol Dirt is going to be gone. But now, because they're having a hard time to figure out what they're going to do with the spring Bristol date for 2024, they're talking about having 2 Bristol concrete dates. Now, look, in my opinion, I would definitely be okay with having 2 Bristol concrete dates. But here's one of the reasons why they had gotten rid of one of the concrete dates in the first place. The attendance. We all forget that in 2019, they had cut off turns 3 and turn 1 and put billboards there because attendance had gotten so bad. That is a huge reason why dirt had come on to Concrete Bristol starting in 2021. And while attendance wasn't insanely better, it was a little better with the dirt. If Concrete Bristol does end up having 2 dates in 2024, it sounds like there's a good chance that it could end up happening. People 1000% need to show up. Because if people don't show up, they're going to lose another date again. Now, I have thought maybe we can move this race a little bit later in the year. Maybe move it to maybe June, perhaps. That wouldn't be a bad shot in my opinion. I think maybe moving it's kind of what they did in 2020. Because one of the biggest issues is the rain as well. The weather's been a big factor, and having it in spring has been a major issue. I think moving it closer to the summer would actually be a really, really good decision because, 1, you're not very likely going to have rain. But 2, I think more fans actually will show up in attendance because kids will be out of school at the time, and more fans can show up to the racetrack. So I would definitely be for this. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know at this point what exactly the plans would be. So we'll see what happens in regards to what happens to Concrete Bristol. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if it ends up having 2 dates. It does sound like there's a good chance that it could end up happening. We'll have to see what decisions are made in regards to that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sammy Smith. Now, we've talked about Sammy Smith a couple times on this channel, including on Wednesday, but Sammy Smith revealed to the media during Playoff Mania Day for the Xfinity Series that he is close to announcing his 2024 plans, but he does not reveal what team he is going to be driving for. Now, there's a strong chance and strong possibility that Sammy Smith could potentially return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. However, there have been a lot of speculation recently that Sammy Smith may be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. Now, where could Sammy Smith head up? Well, a lot of people do believe there's a really strong chance and a possibility that Sammy Smith could be headed to drive the number 8 car for Junior Motorsports in 2024. A major reason for that is because of his sponsor, Pilot Flying J. Pilot Flying J is a former sponsor of Junior Motorsports. They sponsored Josh Berry for a few races and also sponsored Michael Annett. And he has major connections with that family, with the Pilot Flying J company. Of course, I think his dad is part of that company as well, if I'm not mistaken. And he's got other brands that work as well. Now, Sammy Smith obviously would not be my first choice to go into the 8 car, but I think it wouldn't be a bad decision overall. Sammy Smith has scored 1 win so far with JGR, and I think Sammy Smith being over there would be a very solid move for Junior Motorsports. I don't know if he would be a championship threat or a contender. But now the big question is, if Sammy Smith does leave Joe Gibbs Racing to go over to Junior Motorsports 2024, what team, who would take over? Well, you've got Ryan Truex in the running. He's wanted to go full-time next year in the Xfinity Series. I think there's a great chance he's going to be full-time next year in Xfinity. You've also got a couple other drivers who've been heavily rumored. You've got Matt DiBenedetto who's in the running for that. Matt DiBenedetto is in the running for a lot of rides next year for 2024. He's not returning to Rackley next year. I think he's in the running for a lot. You've also got Corey Heim is in the running, and Trevor Bayne who's in the running as well for those rides. Corey Heim, of course, having a great year in the Truck Series. Just picked up the win last night at Bristol and will be ready soon for the Championship 4. I know he's had beef with Joe Gibbs Racing's ARCA team in the past, but I certainly think there's a good chance he'll be in Xfinity next year. And then I go back to Trevor Bayne. Trevor Bayne's running the Xfinity race later this evening, and I think he's got a great chance and great possibility of heading up there and moving up and running full-time next year. So he wanted to run full-time this year in 2023, but at least he's going to get a few starts here, and I think he's done a really solid job at Daytona, and I think he will for sure be a threat at Bristol tonight. So we'll see what happens in regards to gets the ride, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Sammy Smith going into 2024 and where he does end up driving. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. Now, there's been a lot of talk and conversation surrounding Carson Hocevar over the last few months because a lot of people have been speculating that Carson Hocevar may move up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024 and maybe taking over the number 77 car for Spire Motorsports. Now, a couple weeks ago, Don Hopkins from Front Stretch had actually interviewed Carson Hocevar in regards to 2024, and Carson says he knows what he will be doing in 2024 and cannot reveal that information at this time. Now, obviously, there's 2 series he can end up driving next year, the Cup Series or the Xfinity Series. He also has been linked to that number 8 car for Junior Motorsports as well for 2024. But I do not believe that he'll be going to the 8 car for Junior Motorsports in 2024 simply because of the funding and sponsorship that is going to be needed for the 8 car. And I do not believe Carson Hocevar has a lot of funding and a lot of sponsorship currently at the moment. So that's why there's a lot of speculation he might be headed over to 77 car for Spire Motorsports. One, I don't think the 77 car is as bad as people make it out to be. I think the 77 car, a huge reason why that ride is not as good is because, no disrespect, but Ty Dillon has not been good in the 77 car. And another reason why the 77 could be available is because there's really not a lot of funding that's going to be needed for that car. Gamebridge has a huge partnership with Spire Motorsports for the next few years, and we've seen Gamebridge a couple times on that 77 car. And Carson Hocevar also can get the best out of equipment. Look what he's done in the few select Cup starts he's had. He's had 2 top 20 finishes and was likely going to potentially get a top 15 finish in his debut. So he could have had 3 top 20 finishes to start his career, which would be extremely impressive for someone who is only 20 years old, by the way. And I think that Carson Hocevar is an extremely talented driver, and I think he's going to do great things next year. Now, do I think Carson Hocevar is going to be a contender for the playoffs? No, absolutely not. But I think Carson Hocevar will be a top 25 contender in the points, though I will say the Cup Series field is getting more and more and more tough. And I'm really intrigued to see what's going to happen there. But nonetheless, I do think Carson Hocevar is going to do solid next year. I think he will be Spire Motorsports in 2024, and I think he will do a pretty good and solid job in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. I think he will be driving for Spire Motorsports in 2024. We'll see what happens. We'll see what decisions are made. Again, there's a lot of announcements coming later today. We'll see what happens, but it sounds like at this point that we may be seeing Carson Hocevar in a Spire Motorsports NASCAR Cup Series car. I would imagine he'll probably make some Xfinity Series starts with that team as well, but I think Carson Hocevar will be with Spire Motorsports in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, over the last weeks, there's been a lot of chatter surrounding Zane Smith and his future for 2024. Well, Zane Smith went on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio earlier this week on Wednesday, and he says he has his deal signed for 2024. He told Daniel Trotta and Larry McReynolds, I believe, that he says, my deal is done, and I know what I'm doing next year. And he says that he may be able to announce it sometime this week. what could this announcement be? Well, over the last 2 days, there's been a lot of chatter circulating that Zane Smith could potentially be headed to Trackhouse Racing in 2024. Obviously, Trackhouse Racing, we'll talk about Shane Van Gisbergen here in just a little bit, but Trackhouse Racing has been coveting for Zane Smith. And if he does go to Trackhouse Racing in 2024, it's actually going to kind of be a little bit of full circle. Let me explain. Remember, he actually originally was supposed to drive the one car for Chip Ganassi Racing in 2022. But that was when Trackhouse Racing came in and bought up the Chip Ganassi Racing NASCAR Cup Series team, and Zane Smith would then go to Front Row Motorsports. So it would be full circle. And I will say this about Zane Smith. I think Zane Smith is 1,000% ready to jump up to the NASCAR Cup Series next year in 2024. He got a top 10 in the Coke 600 with Front Row Motorsports, and I think that he's done a great job in the Truck Series. And Zane Smith has publicly said that he is ready. He says more than everything that I could ever want it. I think that there's been a lot of people that have thrown out Stewart-Haas Racing. I thought he'd be going to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024, and that is certainly a possibility. But with all the Kaulig rumors that are going around, which you obviously saw the hand that came out, some are speculating he also go to Kaulig Racing next year in 2024, and that is certainly possible. Kaulig Racing has an announcement later today with the 16 and the 31 car coming out, so that sounds like that could be a potential possibility as well. But if you were to ask me currently, moment where I think Zane Smith is going to end up going, I think it's going to be maybe Spire Motorsports with the Trackhouse partnership, which we'll get to that here in just a little bit as well. Obviously, I think Zane Smith is ready. I think he will do a very good job next year in 2024, regardless of what team he ends up driving for. But again, I really like Zane Smith a lot. It's a shame he can't drive for Front Row. Keith Silk, by the way, could drive for Front Row next year in the Truck Series if he wanted to. But Zane Smith, like I said, has publicly stated that he does not want to be in the NASCAR Truck Series anymore, and he wants to move away from that and move up to the NASCAR Cup Series in the 2024 season. So we'll see what happens in regards to that and what happens with Zane Smith. But like I said, I think Zane Smith will be in the Cup Series next year in the 2024 year, and I think it's going to be between Spire and Trackhouse on the two teams that he's going to end up driving for in the 2024 season. So we'll see what happens. We'll see where he ends up driving, but I do believe Zane Smith will be with Trackhouse and Spire in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. I think that is going to end up happening. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Live Fast Motorsports. Now, shockingly, it was reported by Adam Stern. There's been a lot of industry chatter recently about Live Fast Motorsports potentially selling a charter. According to Adam Stern, Live Fast Motorsports has declined comment on NASCAR industry chatter that it could sell its charter soon, with Spire Motorsports seen as among the suitors. Among options Spire would have with the charter is helping a team like Trackhouse if it needed a spot for Zane Smith for 2024. Obviously, like I said a little bit ago in this video, it sounds very likely Zane Smith could be partnering up with Trackhouse for 2024. And if Zane Smith was to go to Spire, that would be very, very interesting. But let's talk about Live Fast Motorsports for just a second. Look, I am a massive, massive fan of Live Fast Motorsports. I like the team. I like the people at the organization. However, Live Fast Motorsports, while they've shown very slight signs of improvement, they haven't shown major signs of improvement for the last 2 years. And this could be the third year where they could potentially get their charter revoked. If you're in the bottom three for 3 consecutive years, your charter can get revoked. If I'm not mistaken, they've been in the bottom 3 for the last 3 years, and there's a good chance for the 4th year in a row that they're going to be in the bottom 3 once again. NASCAR has a right to revoke your charter. So Live Fast Motorsports could be doing the very, very smart thing and end up selling that charter, which the money they get, because we're hearing right now the charters are worth $40 to $50 million, they could either, one, go ahead and shut that team down and just focus on Xfinity, or maybe just retire altogether. But the money that they could invest from that could be put into their Xfinity program. We have at times seen huge signs in showing of improvement from the Beasley Cloud Motorsports team this year in Xfinity. The best I've ever seen that team perform. And Anthony Alfredo's had some really solid runs in the 78 car this year. He's also struggled times this year in 2023. But I think that he's done a decent job at times throughout the 2023 year. And imagine what they could do with even a small fraction, like $10 or $15 million, how much better that team could end up having. Because certainly I think Anthony Alfredo has a really good chance of returning that team in 2024. Now, let's now speculate where that charter could end up going for 2024. Well, I think there's a lot of options where that charter could end up going. First, like I mentioned, Spire Motorsports. They're the favorites right now to pick up this charter because of Zane Smith. Zane Smith could drive for Spire in 2024 because they could get a partnership with Trackhouse Racing for 2024, which I think would be a very, very interesting move. So I think Spire Motorsports could be a really major favorite for that. Another team is 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing does want to expand in 2024. They made that knowledge public. They want to expand for 2024. They almost did, like, for 2023. They've already got 3 cars, a third part-time car that we have seen drivers like Kamui Kobayashi drive and also Travis Stranda drive. And that ride had been reserved for Kurt Busch, but also I think maybe at one point Carl Edwards could drive for this ride as well. But nonetheless, that could end up happening where 2311 gets a third car. They do want to expand to 3 full-time entries, and eventually they want to have a team like JGR where they could have 4 full-time entries because they have like a partnership with Joe Gibbs and not like a major like technical alliance of the team. They kind of have a partnership, so they do want to expand. Another team is RFK Racing. RFK Racing also wants to expand. Brad Keselowski made that public at Michigan, where they've had basically 2 cars at a time. They do want to expand, but charters, like you mentioned, are very, very expensive, and they're not selling, but it sounds like they could be selling. RFK could somehow maybe pick up Zane Smith in that potential agreement. RFK, like I said, does want to expand, so RFK could be a potential possibility of them expanding. Another team that I think they would love to expand is Front Row Motorsports. Front Row has got 2 cars. They tried to get a third charter for 2024, but unfortunately they were denied that third charter at the time. So that could certainly be a possibility. RCR is another team that I think wants to expand for 2024. RCR would love to. They were really maybe going to bring Austin Hill up. He's going to be there for multiple years in their Xfinity program. So RCR is definitely a possibility. Another team is Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse Racing absolutely wants to expand toward the future. Again, they want Zane Smith in their house long term, more than likely. And of course, they have Shane Van Gisbergen, we'll be talking about here in just a little bit. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when it comes to this charter, who ends up picking the charter. I think at this point, the most likely to pick up the charter is going to be Spire Motorsports. Now let's take a look at what I think the lineup is going to end up being. So if they do end up having 3 cars for 2024, I think their lineup is going to be Corey LaJoie in the 7. We know that for sure. LaJoie signed a multi-year contract extension with the team. I think Carson Ospar will drive the 77 car for the team. Carson Ospar is heavily rumored to be taking over the 77 car for Spire, while Ty Dillon is heavily rumored to be headed to Colleague Racing for 2024. And finally, I think Zane Smith will be driving the 78 cars. I think it's just going to be the 78 car with Spire Motorsports number instead of a Live Fast Motorsports car. Because we know Live Fast Motorsports almost wanted to put Tyler Reddick in that car when Kyle Busch had joined the team for 2023, for Reddick, of course, went over to 2311 Racing. But at this point, I think it does end up happening. I think it'd be a good decision. And I think the field will get more competitive. Spire Motorsports shown huge signs of improvement. And a team like Rick Ware as well, another backmarker team, has gone from being just a backmarker team to kind of being more of a mid-pack team now. And it just shows the field is getting more and more competitive on a week-by-week basis. And I think the future of the sport, at least on that end, is getting more and more exciting. Nonetheless, though, I do believe that we're going to see Live Fast Motorsports sell the charter, and I think it's going to end up being handed over to Spire Motorsports 2024, and I think you'll be seeing a lineup of Corey LaJoie, Zane Smith, and Carson Hocevar for 2024. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. The long-awaited announcement finally came out on Wednesday evening. Shane Van Gisbergen will drive for Trackhouse Racing in 2024. He will not drive full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series, though, as he will be driving in a development deal with Trackhouse Racing. He'll run select races in the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, Truck Series, plus late models and other races as well in 2024. Really, really awesome to see this. Shane Van Gisbergen, someone who I've become a huge fan of over the last few years, a legend of the Supercar Series, and has had 2 top 10s in the NASCAR Cup Series in his first 2 starts, which was the first time it happened since Terry Labonte back in 1978. And also in his NASCAR Cup Series debut, won at the Chicago Street Course and was the first driver in the modern era of NASCAR history to win in his NASCAR Cup Series debut, and the first driver to do that at least since 1963, when Johnny Rutherford did that at Daytona in the qualifying race, when those races were able to award points. I am really, really stoked about this for Shane Van Gisbergen. I think this also is a very, very good decision for his development as well, because I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is being smart here by not just jumping straight up to the NASCAR Cup Series. He wants to learn. He wants to basically do this and go and run really, really competitive, and I think learning is very, very good. So now the big question is, where will he race? Well, obviously for the Cup Series, we know for sure he'll be driving for Trackhouse Racing. Now, the number of races was not disclosed on how many races he is going to run, but I would imagine that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to run around 8 to 12 races in the Cup Series next year in 2024. Probably a majority of them being road courses. We're not entirely sure what the Cup Series schedule is going to look like for 2024, but certainly I think that we could see him driving for Trackhouse in quite a few races, and I think in those races, how fast Trackhouse seems to be getting recently, I do believe that we're going to see Shane Van Gisbergen compete for wins. We saw what he could do at Indy and also at Chicago. I think he'll be very, very competitive and could win a Cup Series race. Now let's talk about the Xfinity Series. Xfinity, I think, is very interesting. I think there's one team in particular that he's going to end up driving for, and that is Kaulig Racing. Justin Marks went on Sirius and NASCAR Radio yesterday afternoon and confirmed that he is going to have a major presence in Xfinity. So it sounds like to me that a majority of that schedule, he's going to run probably a majority of the NASCAR Xfinity Series season in 2024, running a lot of oval races, but also probably running a lot of road course races as well. And I think that will be with Kaulig Racing either in the 10 car or the 11 car next year in 2024. So I think that he'll be with Kaulig Racing in Xfinity, which I think is a very solid team. They're not a great team right now like they were in 2021, but I think they will be solid with that team in 2024. Next, the Truck Series. There's only one truck team that I can think that he can drive for, and that is a team he made his NASCAR Truck Series debut with, which is Nice Motorsports. Now, I think he'll be in the 41 truck. I don't think he'll be in the 42 trucks. I think someone else is going to get that right for 2024, but I think he'll be in the Truck Series with Nice Motorsports. Nice Motorsports, the team he was very competitive in his debut with. They've shown a lot of improvement this year. Nice Motorsports has all around with their organization. We've seen the 41 car be somewhat solid this year, and also Carson Rosvar scored 3 wins in the Truck Series this year. It could win more by the end of the year in the last 3 weeks. I think he will be with Nice and do a great job with that organization. And in talking about late models and ARCA, I'm going to combine both these. I think there's one team in particular that he's going to drive for. Pinnacle Racing Group. Pinnacle Racing Group, I believe, has a partnership with Trackhouse Racing in the late model scene. Connor Slitch, I think, is part of the Trackhouse group, and we've seen Luke Fenhouse drive for that team. And Pinnacle Racing Group almost won the ARCA East Championship this year, but they, of course, lost the championship this year to William Sawash. But for them in their first year, they did a very, very good job. And I think that you're going to see Shane Van Gisbergen drive for them in ARCA, which I think is going to make ARCA racing more exciting as well. Having a guy like Shane Van Gisbergen with the caliber he has, I think he's going to do a great job. But again, I am really stoked about this with Shane Van Gisbergen. And I think, like I said, this is a fantastic move on his part. And not just focus on racing in the NASCAR Cup Series, because a lot of people thought he should jump straight up to Cup, and I thought he would be going full-time Cup racing in 2024. But overall, I think he's making absolutely the right and the best decision, not just for his career, but for his long-term self, because I think that this is going to help Shane Van Gisbergen not only become a better driver in the sport, but I think he's going to be able to perform at his best and perform at the best potential that he has going forward. And I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to do a great job next year. Again, I think he will be very competitive in all the series he runs, and I think the more experience he gets, the better he will become. I think in 2025, though, there's a really strong chance to be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series. I think the one-year development deal is a very, very smart decision. And Justin Marks' goal with Project 91 initially was to make sure that he basically got as much experience who could run full-time in NASCAR. Now he's going to run full-time in NASCAR in 2024. I think a lot of fans like myself are really stoked about this and cannot wait for this. Now, obviously, one of the biggest questions is what sponsors will he have? I think Kaulig will provide some sponsorship for him next year in 2024. Nice has a Worldwide Express partnership, but I would imagine that Worldwide Express is going to be working a lot with Shane Van Gisbergen next year in the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series as well. But also Enhance or Embrace Health will also probably more than likely sponsor Shane. I know that Red Bull would love to sponsor Shane, but obviously Red Bull has been out of NASCAR for a very, very long time, and I'm sure they're wanting to partner up with NASCAR currently at the moment, but it'd probably be cool for them to come back and sponsor Shane next year in 2024. But nonetheless, it's so exciting to see that Shane Van Gisbergen is coming to NASCAR in 2024. I think he's going to do a really solid. I think he's going to do an amazing job. And I know people say, why are you overhyping this guy? This guy is one of the best race car drivers in the world, in my opinion. A dominant in the V8 supercars, and I think he's going to have a lot of fun. He seems like he's having a ton of fun with NASCAR currently at the moment, and I do believe that Shane Van Gisbergen will have a lot of fun next year in 2024. The radio chatter he'd had with Nice was really fun to listen to. His personality is great. His personality is amazing, and I love Shane Van Gisbergen, and it's amazing to see a guy like him coming to race in NASCAR 2024. I think he's the closest thing we have to Marcus Ambrose. Marcus Ambrose was a really, really great road course racer in the Cup Series and was pretty solid on ovals as well. I think it would be really cool for him to surpass Marcus Ambrose on those stats. And also Juan Montoya as well when he came over and ran full-time in NASCAR and did a really, really solid job in the Cup Series. He never had top-tier equipment except 2009, where, of course, he didn't win, but he was pretty good in that 2009 year. So we'll see what happens, how well Shane Van Gisbergen does, but I think he'll do pretty good in NASCAR in 2024. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, thus go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links in the description below for that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. How well do you think Shane Van Gisbergen is going to perform in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Live Fast Motorsports potentially selling a charter? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, there's going to be 2 more videos dropping. We're going to have the College Racing 2024 announcement coming. We'll talk about that later this afternoon. And then, of course, we'll also have the Xfinity Series race review from Bristol. Then tomorrow on the channel, we are going to have 2 videos dropping, maybe a 2025 NASCAR Cup Series driver lineup predictions, and also, of course, we will have the Cup Series race review for the Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol. Then on Sunday, there's going to be another special video dropping on the channel. And then on Monday, of course, more than likely, another NASCAR news video is going to be dropping. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.